As a paranormal investigator with Pi, I came to La Bahia to investigate the paranormal. My experiences here were so profound and enlightening that I must strongly urge all paranormal investigators to leave your preconceived notions at home and prepare yourself for a life-changing and literally spiritual event. Don't come in here with mindset and prepare to conduct an investigation as usual. Be aware that centuries of life played out in a dynamic and historically significant way that will leave you stunned, humbled, and grateful for the privilege of visiting. Here we are afforded the unique opportunity to experience firsthand history preserved. Enter this site with reverence, respect, and awe, for you're in a place that should be viewed as a pivotal turning point of Texas history. The Presidio has been a popular site for paranormal investigations. Many paranormal groups have made repeated trips to the site, as evidenced by the logbook found in the quarters. However, a look at these groups' websites did not reveal any documented evidence of note. Despite the rumors of intense paranormal activity, we did not uncover any that could be documented. The sodium vapor floodlights in the compound, highway noise, local livestock, and neighborhood noise made this investigation difficult. There are reports in the quarters logbook of an apparition seen as a large friar near the well. These descriptions resemble what we would call an elemental. It must be remembered that these grounds are sanctified by the local Catholic chapel, which has been active since the 1700s on these grounds. This tends to lead me to disbelieve these sightings. My favorite entry in the log was written by an 8-year-old boy who states his family had to leave early because his younger brother saw a ghost. He says he is coming back when he gets older with cooler people. This site has experienced a lot of suffering and death. There are many graves on the grounds. In the chapel courtyard is the obvious tombstone of Annie Taylor, who was a Mexican girl and married to Will Taylor. She became sick and was at the home of her parents near La Bahia when she died. Her grave is only one of the many in this courtyard in front of the chapel. Some of the graves can be determined by the small crosses that have been cut into the stone walls at the base of the church. These mark the heads of the graves. We did see a brief interesting EMF reading at the southeast turret. I chased off a group of teenagers that tried to jump the wall at the southeast turret around 11 o'clock. The Presidio is south of Golaid on Highway 183. The present significance of the Presidio is that it and the two nearby missions constitute the only surviving example of a Spanish colonial mission Presidio complex, and one of the very few in North America. The Presidio Fort is considered the world's finest example of a Spanish frontier fort. The Presidio is the most fought-over fort in Texas history, having seen participation in 6 national revolutions and wars for independence. Originally built on the bay, in the fall of 1749 the Presidio and the missions were moved to their present location to explore ways to prevent further encroachment of the English and French on the Texas coast. A permanent settlement by Spain, La Bahia grew around the protection of the fort. The name of the town changed to Golaid in 1829 as an anagram for Hidalgo in honor of the patron priest of the Mexican Revolution. Golaid became the second largest populated settlement in Spanish Texas. Then the plot thickens. On October 9, 1835, a group of Texas citizens led by Captain George Collingsworth entered Golaid, attacked the Mexican garrison stationed at the Presidio, and took possession of the fort for Texas. This action was just 1 week after the incident at Gonzales, Texas. The first Declaration of Independence of Texas was declared here at La Bahia on December 20th, 1835. Three months later, the Golaid massacre occurred. Colonel James Walker Fannin had surrendered to the Mexican army, yet he and 341 men were executed by General Santa Anna on Palm Sunday, March 27, 1836. This mass execution by Santa Anna agitated Texicans, and volunteers streamed forth to enter the fight for independence from Mexico. If not for this massacre, Texas might still be part of Mexico. If the massacred soldiers had been released as promised, there's a strong possibility the war would have had a different outcome. The Our Lady of Loreto Chapel has been in continuous use since the 1700s. Mass is at 5 p.m. on Sundays. Fannin's men were imprisoned in this chapel, with Fannin being held in what is now the flag room. Just across the courtyard from the chapel is the entrance to the formal officers' quarters. It is now a nice 2-bedroom apartment, which we rented for the night. Just outside the Presidio La Bahia is a sculpture of the Angel Golaid, and a monument and amphitheater for General Zaragoza. A block east is a monument where Fannin's men who died in the massacre of Golaid were eventually burned and buried. The Texas Revolution occurred as a result of a series of events that began long before the first shots fired in Gonzales on October the 2nd. The actual Battle of San Jacinto lasted less than 20 minutes, but it was in the making for 6 years. It had its prelude in the oppressive Mexican Edict of April 6, 1830, which prohibited further immigration of Anglo-Americans from the United States to Texas, and the disturbances at Anahuac and in the Battle of Veracruz, 1832. The proposed Constitution in 1833, brought before the central government of Mexico, eventually led to the imprisonment of Stephen F. Austin in Mexico City in 1834. Immediate preliminaries were the skirmish over Buchanan at Gonzales, the Battle of Concepcion, the grass fight, and the siege and capture of San Antonio, all in late 1835 and early 1836. The Texas Declaration of Independence at Washington on the Brazos on March 2, 1836 officially started the revolution. On December 20th, 1835, 92 men gathered in Our Lady of Loreto Chapel signed the first Texas Declaration of Independence from Mexico. This was not ratified. Later, the Washington on the Brazos became the official document. March 20th, 1830, Toledo Creek, the Texican force of approximately 350 men, led by James W. Fannin, was captured and held captive inside the small church at Presidio La Bahia for 7 days. There were so many men inside the chapel that most were forced to stand. Severely wounded Texicans, including Fannin, remained at the Creek battlefield for up to 3 days before being moved to Presidio La Bahia. On the 3rd or 4th day, the non-wounded men were moved outside the chapel into the quadrangle, surrounded by a heavy guard. General Urrea continued his advance to secure Guadalupe Victoria, from where he wrote Santa Anna recommending clemency for the Goliad prisoners. 1 week after Fannin's capture, however, Santa Anna bypassed Urrea and ordered Colonel Joseph Nicholas de la Portela, the commander at Goliad, to carry out the congressional decree of December 30th, 1835, that captured armed rebels must be executed as pirates. March 27th, 1836, on the order of General Santa Anna, Fannin and a force of almost 350 men were massacred just outside the walls of Presidio La Bahia on Palm Sunday. During the second day of the engagement with Fannin at Colita, Fannin was convinced that making another stand would be futile. The Mexicans had brought up artillery, which was decimating his fortified position. Another consultation among his officers produced the decision to seek honorable terms for surrender for the sake of the wounded, and to hope the Mexicans would adhere to them. Fannin's men apparently drafted terms of surrender, guaranteeing that they would be considered prisoners of war, that their wounded would be treated, and that they sooner or later would be paroled to the United States. But Urrea could not ratify such an agreement. He was bound by Santa Anna's orders and congressional decree to accept no terms other than unconditional surrender. He made it clear to Fannin in person that he could offer only to intercede on the Texans' behalf with Santa Anna. The document of surrender, signed by Benjamin C. Wallace, Joseph M. Chadwick, and Fannin, shows that the Texas commander surrendered his men subject to the disposition of the supreme government. But Fannin apparently did not make this fact clear to his men, since survivors' accounts indicate that the Texans were led to believe they were surrendering honorably as prisoners of war and would be returned to the United States. This discrepancy is significant only in the light of the ultimate fate of Fannin's command. Around 6 a.m. on Palm Sunday, March 27, 1836, after being held captive for 1 week, Fannin's men were told to gather up their things. They thought they were going to the port of Copineau and then on to New Orleans. They knew that Colonel Fannin had returned from the port of Copineau the previous day. It was a foggy morning at sunrise. The able-bodied men were formed into 3 groups and under very heavy Mexican guard taken out of the fort. The Mexican troops were lined up on each side of the line of prisoners. One group was taken out on the San Antonio Road, another on the Victoria Road, and the other on the Copineau Road. The prisoners had little suspicion of their fate because each group had been given a different story as to where they were going. One group was told that they were going to gather wood, another to drive up cattle, and the other group was told that they were going to the port of Copineau. At selected spots on each of the 3 roads from 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile from the fort, the groups were halted. After they halted, the guards on one side stepped through the ranks so they were all the guards were on one side, then turned and fired at very close range. Those men that were not killed ran and were pursued by the cavalry. The soldiers then returned to the fort and executed the wounded that were in the chapel. The wounded were taken out and laid in front of the chapel doors. There was about 40 of them. They were then shot as they laid on the ground. Colonel Fannin was saved until last. Fannin's room is now known as the Flag Room. Today the doorway has been sealed, but you can see the outline of the doorway. Fannin was taken outside the chapel, blindfolded, and seated in a chair next to a trench by the water gate. He made 3 requests: not to be shot in the face, his personal possessions be sent to his family, and that he be given a Christian burial. He was shot in the face. An officer took his personal possessions, and his body was burned along with many of the other bodies. 342 men died in the Golaid massacre, which is almost twice the number of men who died at the Alamo and San Jacinto combined. 28 men did escape from the 3 massacre sites, and 17 men's lives were spared. It is from the accounts of the men who escaped and were spared that we know what happened at Presidio La Bahia.
There can't be an electrical outlet across it.
Have y'all tested that before?
Have you?
Did y'all do valences on that earlier?
No.
What is this?
Gotta be some kind of electrical conduit.
Right there at that door?
Yeah, there's gotta be something.
Well, let's test it in the morning, just to see. Because if it's electrical, it'll still be doing that in the morning. And it seems to be in specific places. Because it could be some unshielded wire under that. See, that's what that seems like.
But not over there.
Yeah.
Only here. Okay. Seems to have 2 doors that
open, why would there be something underneath that door?
Okay, that door that you were getting the EMF readings, that one does not open.
It doesn't.
No, it's only that one on the left that opens.
Okay.
There could be an extension cord, or there could be some electrical conduit or unsheathed electrical outlet in that area. Yeah, because if it was there and then it was gone, I would think maybe it could be paranormal because it's consistent.
Yeah.
There's a rock, or is that a bush? Is it a rock or is it a bush? It's a rock. It's a rock. It's a rock.
Has anybody noticed a fake rock in the yard? Yeah, I kicked it a couple of times just to see what it was. Cindy's over somewhere close to it now.
Oh,
Yeah.
fudge. It's just an old fake rock.